You just came over to, hang out at my house, and I'm proposing an ethical dilemma to you. So, it's Sunday, I'm doing my laundry. It's obviously ethical dilemma day. So, I had thrown this up in our Discord for the class, but I'm also going to put it here because I wanted to be able to explain it in a little bit more detail, right? So, here are the undisputed facts. Now, what I want you to keep in mind is that we are not in our ethical dilemmas looking for criminality. What we're looking for is ethical decision making, morality more than criminality. So, we are not going to go arrest anyone. The things that we're looking at is what is the right thing to do? What do you believe the right thing to do is? And more importantly than what you believe, why do you believe it? Where is that answer coming from? So I'm going to give you the ethical dilemma, and then I'm going to give you some areas to think about. And I want you to kind of battle it out, for lack of a better term, in the comments or in the discussion board, depending on where this gets put. Because what I'd like you to think about is that there is more than one answer to a lot of problems. And I would like for you to get used to doing the following: taking an idea out of your head, even if it's a forced situation, and looking without judgment at how you get to a certain way of thinking about something and why you get there. Okay? So, if you haven't taken an ethics class, there are different schools of thought on almost every ethical problem. And almost every ethical problem has been talked about for hundreds of years. So, the good news is we're not the first people to approach this. So, here's your ethical dilemma. Here are the undisputed facts that everyone agrees on. Shortly after midnight, a woman was driving home and she came upon another car pulled over on the side of the road with its hazards on. She slowed down, stopped in front of that car, got out, walked back to the car, saw a man slumped forward in the driver's seat of the car that was in distress, and he was unresponsive when she said, "Hey, hey, are you okay?" Right after that, she returned to her car and drove away. She did not render any aid, and she did not dial 911 for help. Both of those are important. She did not call for help, and she did not render any aid. She returned to her car and drove away. Several hours later, another motorist found the man, and he was dead. Medical testimony shows that if emergency services had been called earlier, his life might have been saved. And the woman is now being sued civilly for negligence and failing to render aid. So, knowing only what you know now, would you find the woman culpable? So, we're not going to say guilty because we're not looking to pursue anyone legally. Do you find her culpable? Do you believe she had a moral obligation to help or at least call for help? All right. So, why would I put this in an ethical dilemma for you? Because there is a really well used ethical question about, is choosing not to help someone morally the equivalent of causing them harm? So, there was a famous philosopher named Rachels in 1975 who wrote a paper, and he said Mr. Jones and Mr. Smith both inherited a child, right? And along with inheriting the child, they also know that if something happens to the child, they will inherit the wealth of the child. So they're managing the wealth right now. And if one of the children dies, they become the heir. So So Mr. Jones takes the baby out and drowns it in his backyard pool, very purposefully. Now, Mr. Smith means to do this, but before he can drown the child in the pool, the child accidentally slips into the pool and drowns. And Mr. Smith just watches the baby drowned. So he doesn't actually put his hands on the child and drown the child. He just watches and does not help. Are these two things to you morally and ethically the same? Does Mr. Smith, who did not take an action, have as large of a burden as Mr. Jones, who did actively drown the child? Are these two the same? And then, of course, applying that to our ethical dilemma, the did not harm this man actively. She didn't stab him in the neck. She didn't strangle him. There's no attempted murder of him on her part, of course. She failed to act. So, is failure to act, like Mr. Smith did in our other example, as morally reprehensible as an action? So, that's one thing. Another question you have to ask yourself, do we as humans have a moral obligation to help strangers who are in danger? And are you just see it from the perspective of you being the person doing the helping? What if you needed the help? Okay. And then we have bystander ethics, right? So we have the ethics of a bystander in this circumstance. She is a bystander. So the second thing that I'm going to present to you is that during the trial, more information came out. And it turns out the woman is a licensed nurse. She's trained to recognize medical emergencies and to respond in crisis situations. Prosecutors argue she had both the knowledge and the ability to help. The defense argues that she was off duty, alone, and afraid for her safety on a dark road. Remembering the first part of our ethical puzzle, which was that she pulled over, got out, walked up to the car, saw there was a problem, came back to her car, got in her car, and drove away. And she neither called 911 nor did she administer any aid. Now, knowing that she's a nurse, how would you vote? And does that change your vote? And why am I asking you this question? Because in ethics, which is a science unto itself, if you are aware, deontology is all about duty-based ethics, right? Does a professional identity create extra responsibility for you? And does that extra responsibility, like doctors are supposed to do no harm, right? You expect your lawyer to be honest with you because they're advocating for you. Does professional training translate outside of the profession when you're driving alone home at night, right? So, this is another question that I have for you to think about. Do professional identities create even a smidge more responsibility in your mind for the person, right? Okay. So then also what you have to factor in here is risk calculations, right? So what if she did act on the man in the car and she made it worse? Would we find her guiltier for that, right? And then also, if he had never died, would we even be talking about this? Are the consequences of the action or the inaction the thing that leads to moral responsibility? Or is it the act or of itself, right? So if no one dies, are we still going to care about this in the way that we care about it if someone died? And is it acceptable to prioritize your own personal safety over an unknown risk to another person? And do these risks have to be equal, right? And then moral luck, what I was talking about before. What if she intervened and made it worse? Would we hold her responsible for the worst? And then also, rarely are any of the decisions that you're going to have to make in any kind of a, let's say you're involved in compliance where you wind up working and you have to follow a set of rules. Rarely are the decisions you're making black and white. They are always shaded by other facts, right? So the last bit of this puzzle I'm going to give you is at this point, we learned something no one knew at the time except the woman. She recognized the man in the car. He had been involved in violent actions during a conflict in her home region years earlier. Independent investigations later showed that he was not just simply following orders, he enjoyed what he was doing when he participated in acts of violence. Members of her extended family were among the people affected by those actions. She told investigators that when she realized who he was, she froze and drove away. And I want to bring back to your mind that what we're talking about holding someone accountable for is the failure to render aid, but it is also the failure to simply call 911. These are two different things. So, this comes into some of the areas where, let's say, you're a doctor and you've sworn to do no harm to your patients, but one of your patients is a really, really terrible person. Are you able to treat them the same? If someone is a truly terrible person, that reduce your ethical responsibility to them. Is there a way that you could mentally, or in this case, I guess it would be moral gymnastics, morally gymnastic yourself into a place where you can convince yourself that your action or inaction was okay because this person is a terrible person and the world is better off without them, right? So I'm interested to see how you look at this case. And I know it's a little bit of a forced scenario, but I want you to go deeper than if I was on a jury, I'd find her guilty. I want you to go into the whys. And I want you to sort of pick out the places where you turn right or left. And interestingly, there is no secret right answer. It depends on what school of thought your morals come from. And we'll discuss a little bit more about that in our next video. I'll see you guys.